The 2010s. What happened in the 2010s? Well, social media became a lot more prevalent. And being a YouTuber was now seen as potentially a proper job one day. Thank you, PewDiePie and Smosh and a select other few. And what was I doing in the 2010s? Well, apart from being a literal child, I was busy watching sports. Basketball, LeBron. And it was mostly F1. F1 was my childhood. The 2010s was my childhood, and to this day, the 2010s is still my favorite era of F1. And now that it's a summer break, and I've gone through every single retro F1 game made in the 2010s, I figured, why not, let's go through the entirety of the 2010s in one video. And it is actually very inspired by a YouTuber called Trey, who made this video, 2010s NBA lore. So go check that out after this one. Now, to start the 2010s, there was one man, there was one figure, very prevalent figure in the F1 community. Someone say the biggest voice of reason in the F1 community. And his name was...
Du bist Weltmeister!
I'm going home!
Multi-21, sir. Yeah, multi-21.
We have to remember these days, because there's no guarantee that they will last forever.
Has he got the better traction? No!
Vettel is on a charge and he's got a... Now Sebastian Vettel squeezes through!
So let's start from the beginning. To end the previous decade, the 2000s, Ross Brawn bought Honda for £1. And I think we all know the fairy tale story. They won the championship that year, both championships, and Jenson Button got his first ever Formula 1 World Championship when people thought he wouldn't even win an F1 race. But it wouldn't be sustainable for Ross to independently continue, running Brawn. So they sold to Mercedes at the end of 2009, and both their drivers, Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello, left. Jenson went to McLaren, and it would have been very funny if Rubens Barrichello stayed at Brawn, because he would have been teammates with Michael Schumacher again.
My name is Ho, H to the OV.
Yes, that same Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion, 91 race wins, retired in 2006, is now back for the 2010 F1 season. And this time is going to be paired alongside German driver Nico Rosberg, who is no joke himself. 3 new teams also joined the grid: Hispania Racing Team, HRT, Virgin, that became Marussia, that became Manor, and Lotus, that became Caterham, and USF1. We don't talk about USF1. In other news, BMW left Sauber, now they're literally sponsorless. Toyota pulled out of F1 even after making their 2010 Challenger, which actually could have been a championship contender. So it's a shame we never got to see this car in action. ING left Renault and simultaneously both of their drivers, and their lineup now is Robert Kubica and Vitaly Petrov. Ferrari bought out Kimi Raikkonen's contract and signed Fernando Alonso. This is totally the least relevant out of all of these, right?
It's his first race for Ferrari, and he's a winner in Bahrain. Fernando Alonso wins for the first time in 2010.
Alonso pulls a Kimi Raikkonen, winning his first race for Ferrari. Well, that thanks to the help of Sebastian Vettel's power unit dying on him. And Felipe Massa's return from injury finds him in P2, completing the Ferrari 1-2. Next time out in Australia, the same luck continues Sebastian Vettel as he DNFs. Jenson Button wins his first race for McLaren colours, and somehow, someway, Robert Kubica ends up on the podium. In Malaysia, this time the bad luck was on Fernando Alonso's side, and Red Bull take their first 1-2 of the season, also their first win of the season. McLaren, again, not so great, and Nico Rosberg, after staying out on the slicks, gets his first podium for Mercedes. He's showing that there's still a little bit of Brawn GP in that. In free practice for the Chinese Grand Prix, and he still tried to countersteer. 3 million IQ moment. What on earth is a safety car restart? This catches out both Red Bull drivers, and it's a McLaren 1-2 with Rosberg in P3, Alonso in P4, and both Red Bulls finish outside the top 5. And then in Spain, lost 18 points because of this, and is actually a really good foreshadow for the rest of his career with McLaren. Another Red Bull 1-2 in Monaco with Robert Kubica finishing on the podium. It's officially a battle for best of the rest between Kubica and Nico Rosberg. Barrichello crashed because of a manhole through his steering wheel on the track and was picked up by a HRT later on. And then the next race in Istanbul,
Webber's left the door wide open.
Oh dear, they've come together! Webber and Vettel have come together. That's Vettel going out, Webber going out. What was going on there?
This was very clearly Sebastian Vettel's fault, but Red Bull still decided to publicly defend him after this. Took him long enough, but Lewis Hamilton wins his first race of the season, makes it 2 in a row in Montreal, which actually had a very interesting strategical aspect of that race. Go watch the Chainbear video. And then the next race in Europe, Mark Webber turned into an Airbus A330. In the next race in Britain, Sebastian Vettel broke his front wing in FP3 and they didn't have a spare part of the new wing, so they took Mark Webber's wing and gave it to Seb. But that didn't matter, as Mark says.
Fantastic guys, stop there for number 2 driver. Cheers.
The next time out the German Grand Prix, Felipe Massa was ordered team orders on Fernando Alonso. This was controversial at the time because team orders have been banned since 2002. But then after this, they realized that teams will do this anyways, so they lifted it. So Ferrari caused team orders to get banned in 2002, then also caused them to get reinstated 8 years later. It's the most Ferrari thing ever. And the Brazilian government hated this, threatened Massa with jail if he would try that at the Brazilian Grand Prix. That's so funny. They've already gone through enough with Barrichello. The rest of the season would be a back and forth between the 4 drivers, with Jenson Button ultimately losing out on the championship fight. That and everyone who was in contention for the championship made stupid mistakes along the way, with Mark Webber having the worst one, throwing away a comfortable 14-point lead in the championship at the Korean Grand Prix. And I also went to my second ever F1 race. I was like 3 years old here. Red Bull secured the Constructors in Brazil, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. They were easily the fastest car and the most dominant throughout the season. And then we head to Abu Dhabi, the final race. A 4-way fight for the championship. Alonso, Hamilton, Webber, and Sebastian Vettel. It ended up being a very boring race. Ferrari messed up the strategy, Red Bull messed up Mark Webber's strategy. But that's not to take away from the world champion. And he's still the youngest ever F1 world champion to this day. Shame for Alonso, who was definitely going to win that championship, but since the FIA saw how difficult it became to overtake, they introduced DRS. Pause, I completely forgot to mention a rule change that was implemented in the 2010 season. Refueling is no longer allowed. And I also completely forgot to mention the points inflation, so let's go back. With DRS also came new Pirelli tires and shark fins being removed, but somehow HRT still had them. So with easier overtaking, the return of Kurz, 2011 was looking to be an absolute brilliant season. Nothing really happened this season. I mean, Massa and Lewis terrorizing each other, that was fun, I guess. The longest F1 race of all time, that was cool, I guess. And to make things worse, Robert Kubica had a near life-ending injury that would sideline him from F1 for the near future. The Bahrain Grand Prix got cancelled that year. A lot of people forget that. It'll be back for the next season though. Mark Webber's worst season of his career, Sebastian Vettel's greatest season of his career, that was good, cool, you know. And the debut of the greatest Venezuelan of all time. Yeah, sure, it had a few things, but the whole year was mid. But oh boy, 2012. 2012. Return of Kimi Räikkönen after 2 years of absence and crashing rally cars. 6 different race winners in the first 6 races. Button, Alonso, Rosberg, Vettel, Maldonado, Lewis, Hamilton. With Rosberg and Maldonado getting their first race wins in F1.
No, I haven't been this disappointed in Shrek 2.
Williams' garage setting on fire. Schumacher even got a pole position at the Monaco Grand Prix, but it was taken away from him because of what he did to Bruno Senna at the Spanish Grand Prix. And because the season was so great, we had to have a compromise. We were given these ugly things. And going to the 7th round, well, it was looking like it was going to be Sebastian Vettel to be the first repeat winner of the season, but no. Renault says,
the interest and it's gone.
And with this also came probably the most nostalgic and the greatest F1 podium in history. Anyways, let's look at the championship standings. How on earth, with the 3rd fastest car, 4th fastest at some occasions? Not to mention his teammate Felipe Massa isn't even in the top 10. What is his witchcraft? 2009 Eastern Conference Finals LeBron type stuff. Yeah, and this was pretty much the trend throughout 2012, or in fact since 2010. Fernando Alonso just carrying the entire load of Ferrari. Felipe Massa was never the same after the injury. Who knows what he could have became, because he was really good in 2009 before he got injured. And one of the biggest risers from 2012, Sergio Perez. At this point of the season, the European Grand Prix, he has 2 podiums already, including a missed opportunity at a win at the Malaysian Grand Prix. Don't worry, Perez, you only have to wait 8 more years. And you know how it solidified that Ferrari has a boat of a car in 2012? Well, the very following race in the British Grand Prix after Alonso's insane comeback, he gets pole position. But because it was wet affected, yeah, the F2012, although it's terrible on pure pace, it was also pretty good in the wet, and not that bad on race pace. And you get those 2 combinations and boom, pole position at the British Grand Prix. But Mark Webber took that win in this cool Wings for Life livery. Although, to be fair, it was probably the best on-track battle we had all season. And the next race at the German Grand Prix came a pretty big championship deciding moment. Wet affected qualifying session, so I guess you know who got pole. Alonso had a pretty quiet race at the front. I mean, there was pressure from behind, sure, but they weren't really making any attacks on him. Lewis Hamilton was very ballsy in this race. Fell down the order, then ended up blocking Sebastian Vettel. This kinda helped Jenson Button as he was able to complete the undercut on Sebastian Vettel. And Seb had quite a bit of ground to make up. But on the penultimate lap, with the help of DRS down the Parabolica, he finds himself round the outside of Jenson Button at turn 6. The only issue is, he completed the move off the track. If you watch the onboard with audio, you can clearly hear him accelerating once he was alongside Button and then proceeded to drive off the track. So it's very clearly not Button's fault for pushing him wide. He drove off himself. He still stood on the podium though, but not for long. He got a 20-second penalty because it was the lightest penalty back in the day. So a P2 became a P5. And Alonso's gap to Sebastian Vettel was now 44 points. Lewis Hamilton wins the last race before the summer break, and a very decent result for Sebastian Vettel. P4, 2 points more than Fernando Alonso, and Roman Grosjean gets his 3rd podium of the season. So Sebastian Vettel, with the 2nd fastest car, had a very shaky first half of the season, missing out points on 2 occasions, both of no fault of his own. But to restart the F1 season at the Belgian Grand Prix, he saw a glimmer of light in the tunnel.
Kobayashi was a bit sluggish, and there's Lewis Hamilton slewing into the wall, and oh dear, Roman Grosjean and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton all coming to grief at La Source, and Alonso's hopes of a 24th point scoring consecutive finish dashed within 260 meters.
More light? This place is absolutely glimmering!
After a poor qualifying, this crash gives him a clear opportunity to end up on the podium, and he climbs up to P2 with Jenson Button winning the race. And in the championship, the gap closes to Alonso by less than a race win, 24 points. And Grosjean also got a run race ban from this because the entire season he was driving like prime Yuji Ida, and this was the final nail in the coffin. And next time out in Monza, Sebastian Vettel would get the complete opposite luck. First he runs Alonso off the track, gets a drive-through penalty, and has to stop the engine. Thank you, Renault. And something funny about all the drivers who DNF'd in Monza, 2 of them finished on the podium in Spa. And the drivers who were on the podium in Monza were victims of the Grosjean crash. Alonso picks up a chunk of points from him in this race, increasing the gap in the championship to 39 points. Seb drops to P4, but the next 4 races, after getting all the bad luck thrown at him all season, the pendulum finally swings. Other drivers are finally getting unlucky. He gets the championship lead by the Korean Grand Prix, and by the end of the Asian Tour, he's ahead by 13 points. If Alonso still wanted to be within contention of the championship, that is a very big gap to climb. But also around this time...
Yes, we're joined by Niki Lauda. Niki, you seem to be the key person in orchestrating the move of Lewis Hamilton from McLaren to Mercedes-Benz.
And everybody at the time thought what Jeremy Clarkson thought.
Is that not a bit like moving from Manchester United to West Ham?
It was It was a bold choice. It was definitely a gamble, but McLaren were definitely going down the downward spiral. They easily had a card to be up there in the championship, but at this point they've been eliminated. And Lewis was clearly getting frustrated with the team by leaking their telemetry on Twitter. And also other moves that happened. Hülkenberg is going to Sauber, Perez is going to McLaren, and yeah, that's about it. Next race out in Abu Dhabi, Sebastian Vettel qualifies in P3 and Alonso qualifies in P7. But Vettel doesn't actually qualify in P3 because he had an underweight car. Didn't have enough fuel, was sent to the back of the grid. In fact, he was sent to the pit lane because Red Bull did a setup change, and he climbed like an absolute madman. Even got damage to his front wing, pit for damages, and still ended up on the podium in P3 alongside Alonso. And Iceman himself, Kimi freaking Räikkönen, wins the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. His first season after 2 years, and he's on the top step of the podium. What can I say? Let the man do his work. As he says, leave him alone. He knows what he's doing. But Ferrari didn't really maximize the most from this. They had the opportunity to bring home big points from Sebastian Vettel, but they only came away with a 3-point swing in the championship. And that 3-point swing would pretty much be cancelled out in the American Grand Prix, as Seb has a battle with Lewis Hamilton. Lewis takes the win, but Seb's in P2, crucially ahead of Fernando Alonso. And this was actually the first US Grand Prix since 2007. And this race came with some controversy for Ferrari because they purposely broke Felipe Massa's gearbox seal so that Fernando Alonso can be promoted in his grid slot. It was the correct decision in the end, although it is a bit dodgy, and Red Bull secured their 3rd ever World Constructors' Championship. And then we had to...
This was it. Alonso versus Vettel.
To win the championship, Alonso had to finish on the podium at minimum, but qualifying 7th while Seb was P4 was not the best way to start things off. Until...
Fernando Alonso goes around the outside and Sebastian Vettel has already lost places, getting caught in no man's land on the inside, locking up and brakes, and there goes Kimi Räikkönen wide and off the track.
And was that...
It's a Red Bull! It's a Red Bull! It's Sebastian Vettel in the middle of the track! It's the worst possible scenario for Sebastian Vettel!
Well, that's it, huh? You know, it was a good season. It was a tough battle. Alonso's gonna get his podium, and Sebastian Vettel is gonna lose out on his 3rd World Championship.
No.
And he's gone straight on! Alonso's gone straight on! And Vettel then has gone over the line in 8th place!
Does he pop himself past Kobayashi? He does pop himself past Kobayashi.
In a matter of 15 laps, Sebastian Vettel has already brought himself within contention to win the championship, despite being dead last after the start. With radiator damage, by the way, and without a safety car as well. But one of the biggest caveats is that when the track would dry a bit, his pace would slightly fall off. Since we all know the wet is the great equalizer, the dry shows a true pace. But he was still having a magnificent drive. Nico Hülkenberg claiming the lead of the race, the McLarens tussling each other after the safety car, which Hamilton ultimately won. Felipe Massa assisting Fernando Alonso in his title fight, Mark Webber falling down the order. Hamilton overtakes Hülkenberg for the lead, but it still doesn't matter. The championship is still sealed. Alonso is not on the podium.
Hülkenberg might just go through here and back up into the lead. No, they've touched! And Hamilton and Hülkenberg come together. Damage for Hamilton and Hülkenberg.
So that does it. The same track where Lewis won his first championship in the same conditions ends like this with a stint with McLaren. It was a fun stint, but it's time to move on. But in our current fight, Alonso finally finds himself back on the podium spot, but is way too far behind Jenson Button, 20 seconds behind. So he's gonna have to settle with P2 and hope Sebastian Vettel finishes outside the top 7. The rain was starting to fall again. Red Bull made one last move for the intermediate tires. Ferrari respond to this as well. Alonso looks clear for the championship at the moment, but after Paul di Resta pits, Sebastian Vettel secures P7, and as a farewell gift, Michael Schumacher gives Seb P6 to further cement the championship. And after Paul di Resta crashed on the penultimate lap,
Button wins, Alonso 2nd, Massa 3rd, and we look now for the man who's once, who's twice, and is 3 times a world champion. It is Sebastian Vettel for Red Bull. 3 constructors titles in a row, 3 drivers championships in a row. It's trebles all round for Red Bull.
Usually in that moment you think it's over, but in that case I just wanted to get going again.
You're the world champion! You're the triple world champion, Sebastian Vettel!
We proved that with a car that is a little bit slower than the others, we can win the championship, and with a car that is a lot slower than the others, we fight until the last race.
Whoa, okay, that was something. Okay, I didn't plan to go that cinematic until I reached Brazil 2012. And then I decided, okay, I'm gonna go full on Steven Spielberg on this, and I'm proud of that. Anyways, what year are we on now? 2013? Okay, cool. So obviously, Lewis Hamilton joining Mercedes, I think that was the biggest news. And Michael Schumacher retiring from F1, one of the greatest of all time, to some people the greatest of all time. And it'll be cool to see what his future endeavors are in the world of motorsport. We already mentioned Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez, but there was a few drivers who were no longer on the 2013 grid. Both HRT drivers, since HRT went bankrupt, so none of them are on an F1 team now. Charles Pic went from Marussia to Caterham. Adrian Sutil is back, after beating up someone in a nightclub. Bruno Senna is gone, thank God. Valtteri Bottas comes in. Guido van der Garde joins the grid, the greatest Twitter poster of all time. Jules Bianchi goes from a Force India reserve driver to a Marussia full-time driver. And the biggest crime, Kamui Kobayashi doesn't get a seat. After getting a podium, they replaced him with, I'm not even joking, the fricking Ban Gutierrez.
You get down from that tree this instant!
No! You're gonna yell at me!
He should have had at least 2 more seasons. We're not counting the following year. We're not counting that. You should have at least had 2 more proper seasons. So the first half of 2013, was actually pretty good. You had Kimi Raikkonen opening the first half of the season, multi-21 meltdown at the Malaysian Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso getting a surprise win at the Chinese Grand Prix and winning his home race in the Spanish Grand Prix just 2 races later. Rosberg winning his home race. Yes, technically Monaco is Nico Rosberg's home race. I'm pretty sure he has a citizenship there. One of the funniest things about that Monaco Grand Prix weekend is that Felipe Massa had the same crash twice. Once in qualifying, once in the race. But probably what this Monaco Grand Prix was most notorious for: the secret Mercedes Pirelli test. Basically, Pirelli had a secret test with Mercedes, which only the FIA and Mercedes were involved. None of the other teams knew about this, and obviously the competitors of Mercedes were unhappy when they found out, especially considering they were testing tires of the current season. And Mercedes was reprimanded by not being able to take part in the mid-season young drivers test. But this test was useless for Pirelli anyways, because they didn't work. 2 races later at the British Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton's tire blows up. Everyone's tires were blowing up. So for the summer break, they decided to switch back to the 2012 tire regulations, and Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull turned into Superman.
Sebastian Vettel now pressurizes Lewis Hamilton on the Kemmel Straight.
Yeah, Sebastian Vettel wiped clear of the entire grid for the rest of the season, winning every single race since the Belgian Grand Prix. And Mark Webber also retires from F1 after a pretty long career and took out his helmet in his final parade lap. Felipe Massa moves from Ferrari to Williams. Kimi Raikkonen is his replacement, forming a super team for 2014. Speaking of Raikkonen, he didn't even complete the season because he was having back issues, and Kovalainen replaced him. And it was later found out that Lotus owe him a lot of money as well. And McLaren have their worst season in years, not finishing on the podium even once. After terrorizing the whole grid in 2012, Romain Grosjean was actually pretty decent in 2013. Some could argue he was better than Raikkonen, but I wouldn't really go that far. Raikkonen led the championship at one point. And after their failed stints with Sauber and McLaren, Perez and Hülkenberg joined forces at Force India. So yeah, second half of 2013, the racing was really not that great. I mean, Korea was pretty good. Quite like Korea. Other than that, it was pretty mid. And worst of it all, it would be the last time that we ever hear because in the following year of 2014,
well, I'm out, guys. If this is what's cool now, I think I'm done. I no longer have any connection to this world.
yeah, these cars sounded horrible. They literally sounded like vacuum cleaners attached to a petrol chainsaw. I'm not saying they sound bad now, because the V6 engines over the years have evolved and sound a lot better now. But back then, oh my gosh, did they sound horrible. But that was fine, because we were given...
Too far back, but he's going to go for it down the inside. Lewis Hamilton comes back into the lead.
Rosberg has got.
Oh, and to be fair, Hamilton has actually got more of a front wing now. And Hamilton's had a massive crash, and he's crashed into his teammate. In towards turn 2, his teammate's got the inside line. They've touched again.
Now, the Formula One motor racing legend Michael Schumacher is in critical condition at this hour, a day after suffering a severe brain injury on the ski slopes of the Alpine resort of Méribel in France.
So you know how I said last year that it was a crime that Kamui Kobayashi didn't get a seat for 2013? Well, he was back in 2014 for Caterham, and he's actually paying for his seat this time, because this team is going broke. The greatest Swede of all time, Marcus Ericsson, is paired alongside him, and we also had the greatest terrorist F1 lineup of all time, Roman Grosjean and Pastor. Why are they on the same team? This is genuinely scarier than a horror movie. I was more scared of the 2014 Lotus lineup than I am of Steven Tyler. Adrian Sutil goes from Force India to Sauber. Korea and India are no longer on the calendar. They've been replaced by Austria and Russia. But there's still a pretty big seat left open. The Red Bull seat, the number 2 Red Bull seat. As we know, Mark Webber retired. So any sane human being at this time would presume, oh, Jean-Eric Verne will get that seat. He's been beating Daniel Ricciardo for 2 seasons in a row. No, Ricciardo replaced Webber instead of Verne. Anyways, first round of the season, Australia. Lewis Hamilton's engine dies, and so does Sebastian Vettel's. And on the top step of the podium was Nico Rosberg, with Daniel Ricciardo in P2, being the first Australian to finish on the podium in Melbourne, and he gets disqualified. Kevin Magnussen, Kevin Magnussen's debut race, finishes on the podium. He's bumped up to P2, and Jenson Button's bumped up to P3. You know what? Not bad after a terrible 2013. And the Ferrari super team is not really a super team because this car sucks. The next race would be the opposite for the Mercedes drivers, as it was complete Lewis Hamilton domination, with Sebastian Vettel finishing in P3, and Felipe Massa was told team orders to let Valtteri Bottas pass. Everywhere Massa goes, team orders follows him. It's like the plague. And then we get...
Rosberg against Hamilton. Hamilton fights back. Rosberg now. Hamilton just couldn't get the traction to fight right back. And towards turn 4 we go. This is where Rosberg went off for the first lap. This is where Hamilton...
And because of Pastor Maldonado's antics, Nico Rosberg was able to box for new tires with the late safety car. And towards the end, Lewis Hamilton put up a defensive masterclass. Prime Hakeem Olajuwon type stuff, and he ends up winning the Bahrain Grand Prix by a second and causing every single Mercedes employee to have high blood pressure that day. And Brian Johnson did the post-race interviews, which is why you're hearing the music you're hearing right now. Lewis would win every race until Spain, and then in Monaco, Nico Rosberg shows that he learned a thing or two from Michael Schumacher as he locks up on purpose at the Méribel corner, causing the yellow flags, eventually giving him pole position and essentially winning the Monaco Grand Prix. But one thing to come from the Monaco Grand Prix, Jules Bianchi gives Marussia their first points in F1. He even had a penalty, but he was still able to finish in the points. And this is the only team of the new 2010 teams that were able to score points. What a story for Marussia. The next race in Canada, Red Bull messes up Sebastian Vettel's strategy, and this helps Daniel Ricciardo overcut him. Lewis Hamilton then overcuts Nico Rosberg, who was stuck behind Felipe Massa. Lewis and Rosberg were having a titanic battle, which Nico eventually won because Lewis Hamilton was having issues of his own. And late into the race, Perez was dropping positions. Ricciardo gets past Perez, and he eventually overtakes Rosberg with 2 laps remaining and continued to build a gap from this. And Felipe Massa and Sergio Perez
the right line. Oh, and Felipe Massa goes into the back, and Sergio Perez, and that is a massive crash into the
And because of this, Daniel Ricciardo gets his first ever win in F1. For the Australians, getting revenge on Sebastian Vettel for Multi-21. Massa gets pole in Austria, and the rest of the season would pretty much be a back and forth, with both of them picking up a DNF each. Ricciardo then won 2 races in a row in Hungary and Belgium, and Rosberg had a disaster class in Hungary. And Alonso actually had a chance to win that race in that terrible Ferrari, but Ricciardo got him the great tire management from him. Sebastian Vettel lost all of his powers, Kimi Raikkonen doesn't exist, and the Williams boys were actually doing a pretty decent job after a terrible 2013. And then we head to Singapore, the turning point of the championship. Lewis Hamilton got pole position with Nico Rosberg lining up alongside him on the front row, and he wasn't able to get off the line. He stalled on the formation lap. They brought him back to the pits to fire up the car again. It worked for a bit, but he was having troubles unlapping himself from a Caterham, so Mercedes decided to, you know what, call it quits. We're gonna stop the car. And Lewis Hamilton retains the championship lead for the first time since the Spanish Grand Prix.
Oh dear, and now we might get a safety car. Adrian Sutil has gone off into the barriers for what will be his 7th retirement of the season.
Adrian, first of all, are you okay from your accident?
I'm okay, yes, no problem.
Everyone's thoughts was yours right now, of course, and you were there, and we saw you standing by the side there. Just talk us through. Do you know what happened, and were the yellow flags being waved for your accident at the time?
Has been sent to the hospital by ambulance because the helicopter cannot go in this condition. So further update will follow. For the moment, we cannot say anything. Okay? You know me. I will keep you updated as fast as I can. Okay?
Lewis Hamilton wins every race from Monza to the US, making it 5 wins in a row, and by the American Grand Prix, his lead on top of Rosberg was 24 points, meaning he could close it out at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Rosberg gets pole, Hamilton stuck behind him, he locks him to the Descida del Lago, and this means the championship will go down to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now you might think, well, 17 points? It's going to be a pretty tough one. Rosberg needs to win, and Lewis needs to finish P6 or below. Or, in fact, I think he needed to finish P7 and below. But nope, in this instance, if Rosberg wins the race, Lewis needs to finish P3. Because Bernie Ecclestone thought it was a brilliant idea to bring in double points for this Grand Prix. But around this time...
Sebastian, you took us all by surprise this morning with the announcement you're leaving Red Bull. How difficult a decision was that to make?
During the Russian Grand Prix, which was actually a very boring race by the way, but during the Russian Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso was announced to be moving to McLaren. Now, I don't think it's a big surprise that Alonso was leaving Ferrari because Stefano Domenicali was the team principal to start the year, but in April he resigned and Marco Mattiacci replaced him, and Alonso and Mattiacci did not have a good relationship at all, and Alonso dipped, went to McLaren, and McLaren are going to have Honda power units for 2015, so, you know, rebirth of the Prime days, the Prost Senna days. He's pairing up alongside Jenson Button, which made one of the strongest pairings on the grid. And along with Alonso leaving, Mattiacci was also dropped, and now he was replaced with Maurizio Arrivabene. So Fernando Alonso goes back to his ex, and Sebastian Vettel goes to his direct rival for the past 4 years. And how about the open seat in Red Bull? Well, you would think, again, Jean-Eric Vergne should be in that seat. He's been grinding it out at Toro Rosso. He's only a year younger than Daniel. He's been beating Daniel. He beat their rookie Kvyat. No, Danny Kvyat ended up getting that Red Bull seat for 2015, and subsequently Jean-Eric Vergne was ousted from F1. But anyways, enough with the seat talk. Nico Rosberg continued his form from the Brazilian Grand Prix and slapped his Mercedes on pole position, with Lewis Hamilton alongside him on the front row. The hope is still alive for the championship. If things finish the way they are right now, Lewis wins it by 3 points. Nico needs one of the Williams boys to overtake Lewis Hamilton and keep him behind for the rest of the race, similar to what Vitaly Petrov did back in 2010. Lewis got Rosberg at the line, and Nico was having reliability issues the entire race to the point where he got lapped by Lewis. So, finish P14, and your world champion for the 2014 F1 season is...
Because Lewis Hamilton comes around the final corner. It's not Rosberg, it's Lewis Hamilton, champion of the world in 2014. I just made a bag of beef. Yeah, nigga, I got a real addiction for this cat.
The way I panned out this championship battle makes it seem like Nico Rosberg was very unlucky. Well, he was unlucky, but Lewis Hamilton had the same amount of reliability DNFs as him. So, you know what? It cancels out. And he also had more reliability DNFs in qualifying. But now, 2014 is coming to an end. A few driver moves. Caterham is no longer on the grid. They ran out of liquid. Marussia get rid of Max Chilton and replace him with Will Stevens. And since, unfortunately, Jules Bianchi is still in a coma, they replace him with Roberto Merri. We already mentioned Red Bull and Ferrari's driver changes as well as McLaren's. So now Sauber, they have Marcus Ericsson and Guido van der Garde. No, they didn't. They scammed Guido van der Garde, and they were actually gonna have Felipe Nasr in that seat instead of Guido. And come the Australian Grand Prix, there was a whole court case about this, to the point where Guido even showed up to Australia in a full Sauber suit. This was super funny. He's still salty about that to this day, by the way. And Toro Rosso had two very unknown names. You've never heard about these names in the world of motorsport before joining them. Carlos Sainz Jr., who's that? And Maximilian Verstappen. I've never heard of that guy before. And I guarantee you, he'll be crap in 2015 because he didn't even do GP2. He just did Formula Renault. Anyways, preseason testing in 2015, the McLaren Honda stint isn't going off to a good start, as Fernando Alonso suffers from an electric shock where he had to be airlifted to a hospital. And he even thought that he was stuck in the 90s at some point. He wasn't clear for the Australian and the Malaysian Grand Prix. He would be replaced by the previous driver in McLaren, Kevin Magnussen, who didn't have a full-time drive for 2015 for some reason. New graphics, easy to read. I like these graphics a lot, by the way. I think these are the best graphics in F1 history, and the 2015 F1 season is now set. This season was the most boring season of the 2010s. And if it wasn't for Sebastian Vettel winning those 3 races with Ferrari, which, by the way, those are absolute banger of races, and it is emotional radio in Malaysia.
Yes! Sì, ragazzi! Oh, mi senti? Mi senti? Grazie, grazie, grazie! Dai, forza Ferrari!
And for some reason, Mercedes were the 3rd fastest car in Singapore. How did that happen? The McLaren Honda being absolutely terrible and not a rebirth of the 80s and 90s McLaren. The greatest American of all time, Alex Rossi, debuts at the Singapore Grand Prix. Williams fumbling a race win, and the birth of the actual demon child himself, Max Verstappen, this season was absolutely unbearable. And Lewis Hamilton sleepwalked his way to the championship. He barely even tried this year. This championship was so bad, the F1 YouTuber Championship was better than the 2015 season.
Ow! Oh, there's a Williams out of nowhere! What's he gonna do? Oh! He's upside down!
And unfortunately, a week before the 2015 Hungarian Grand Prix, Jules Bianchi was officially pronounced dead. After being in a coma for 8 months, battling really hard with these injuries, trying to keep him alive, he just couldn't make it, and is, no longer with us. But something good to come out of the Jules Bianchi crash was that F1 are now seriously considering head protection, which is why for the 2016 season in preseason testing, they were testing out the brand new Halo concept. Anyways, the 2016 season had an influx of rookies with insane potential joining the grid, like Pascal Wehrlein, Jolyon Palmer, Stoffel Van Dorn. Well, not immediately. He didn't join immediately, did he? And more importantly, a brand new F1 team is joining the grid. Remember my quick brief mention of US F1? Well, we kind of got that, 6 years later with Haas F1 team, an American F1 team, which is based in the UK, but we ignore that part. At least they have an American principal. No, he's German. Do they have American drivers? No, one of them is French. Well, the other's Mexican, so that's kind of close, I guess. This is barely an American F1 team, let's be honest. Wait, why didn't they sign Alex Rossi? That's just coming across my mind right now. Renault are back on the grid as a works team, and the previous year, Lotus actually used Mercedes engines. And they have Jolyon Palmer, as I already mentioned, and Kevin Magnussen, who's back on the grid after a hiatus in 2015. Marussia fully rebrands into Manor, and the two drivers, Will Stevens and Roberto Merhi, are no longer driving for Manor. They've been replaced by Pascal Wehrlein, as I've mentioned already, and Rio Haryanto, who was backed by the nation of Indonesia. And since PDVSA broke, Maldonado is no longer in F1. And the new track on the calendar, Azerbaijan, and the tradition of alternating between Hockenheim and the Nürburgring is officially dead. And Red Bull also did a whole rebrand. Personally, I prefer the metallic more than the matte, but I can live with it. And to start the first 4 races of 2016...
Nico Rosberg wins! Rosberg wins the Bahrain Grand Prix! Rosberg has made it 3 wins out of 3! It's Nico Rosberg who wins in Russia!
Nico Rosberg continues his form in late 2015 and wins 7 races in a row. And Lewis Hamilton is getting a plethora of bad luck in qualifying and also in the race. He can't catch a break this year for some reason. By the time he reached the Russian Grand Prix, is 43 points. That's a race win and second place. Some other things I haven't mentioned yet. Elimination qualifying, they only use that for the first 2 races. Thank God it's gone. 3 compounds are now used per race weekend instead of 2, and they'll actually be called by their compound names instead of option or prime. And there's a new compound added, the Ultra Soft. And one rule change, radio isn't allowed. Because since, modern F1 cars are practically supercomputers and need assistance to operate properly throughout a race, the FIA decided to ban radio because they wanted the drivers to figure it out on their own. Well, this totally wouldn't come crucial in the later part of the season. Or maybe they just heard Jensen Button's radio and they don't want to broadcast it every race.
Very poor, laterally delighted traction. As soon as I touch the throttle, the cars in front are much stronger. On the west side, on the front side.
But one thing that happened at the Russian Grand Prix. This is not helped by the fact that Kvyat already did something to Sebastian Vettel at the Chinese Grand Prix. It was very aggressive, but I don't really think this needed an altercation in the cooldown room. But after 2 incidents in a row that caused Sebastian Vettel to complain to Christian Horner, Kvyat is dropped from Red Bull and replaced with Max Verstappen for the Spanish Grand Prix. Hamilton gets his first pole since the Australian Grand Prix, and him and Rosberg are side by side all the way until turn 5, and then...
Hamilton's onto the grass, and Hamilton's had a massive crash, and he's crashed into his teammates!
This opens up the window for Red Bull and Ferrari to potentially get their only wins of 2016. They decided to split the strategies between their number 1 and number 2 drivers, giving their number 1 drivers the 3-stop and giving their number 2 drivers the 2-stop. Well, the 2-stop ended up being superior, and with Max Verstappen holding off Kimi Räikkönen for the entire race...
At 18 years and 227 days old, Max Verstappen wins a Formula 1 Grand Prix, wins the Spanish Grand Prix, and is the youngest driver ever to win a Formula 1 World Championship Grand Prix. Yes!
Bow down to your new fucking king!
Toto Wolff reasonably got pissed off. And now, if any of the Mercedes drivers crash with each other, doesn't matter whose fault is it, they have to pay. Now in Monaco, Daniel Ricciardo gets pole position, so Red Bull are continuing their form, and I guess they're proving that Barcelona wasn't a fluke. They left him in the box for too long because they forgot to give him his tires, and he lost the lead to Lewis because of this after being comfortably ahead for most of the race. And finishes P2, Perez in P3, and where was Rosberg? P7. Overtaken at the line by Nico Hülkenberg. In Canada, again, Rosberg had a stinker and Hamilton won the race. And then we head to Baku. You know, new track on the calendar, Lewis Hamilton crashes in Q3 and has to start from P10. And this race was horrible. But throughout the race, Lewis Hamilton was having issues with his car. And it could be easily fixed if Bono just told him what to do. But Bono can't tell him what to do because engineer assistance was banned. So he wasn't able to progress further. He finishes in P5 and Nico Rosberg wins, getting a 15-point swing. Then Austria. Rosberg qualified P6 because of a grid penalty for replacing the gearbox after a crash in free practice. And during the race, since Rosberg's in P6, he's on an alternative strategy to Lewis Hamilton. And in Lewis Hamilton's pit stop, they left him in for way too long, and on the exit, Rosberg gets ahead of him. So for their second stops, to right their wrongs, Mercedes decided to give Lewis Hamilton the undercut. And it was a slow stop again anyways, and when Rosberg pitted, they were 1.2 seconds faster on Rosberg's stop. It was a game of catch-up between the two towards the end, and literally on the final lap of the race, Nico Rosberg purposely drives into Lewis Hamilton, who attempted to move around the outside, giving him damage and dropping down to P4, and Lewis Hamilton wins the Austrian Grand Prix and gets his third of the season. Rosberg, with an aggressive defensive maneuver, ruins his own race. Pascal Wehrlein scored points for Manor, and Sauber, once again like 2014, the absolute worst team on the grid. So remember how Lewis Hamilton got shafted by the radio regulations in Azerbaijan? Well, in Great Britain, it was Nico Rosberg's turn, as he gets a 10-second time penalty for getting a radio assistance for fixing an issue with his car, and lost P2 to Max Verstappen. Now losing P2 to P3 is much better than the DNF, especially in a close championship battle, and this DNF definitely puts into perspective how stupid the radio regulations were, which is why 2 races later at the German Grand Prix, the FIA lifted the ban. But the race in between, at the Hungarian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton leads for the first time this season. Remember Rio Haryanto? Well, you probably don't because I haven't mentioned him at all. But Indonesia ran out of money. Not surprising right there. And he will be replaced by Esteban Ocon for the rest of the season. Jenson Button and Felipe Massa are going to be retiring at the end of the season as well, which is very funny in hindsight actually. Now, this is classic Lewis Hamilton. Slow burn to start off the year, picks up his form at some point, and for the second half of the season onwards, he turns into prime Alan Prost mixed with Senna and freaking Nigel Mansell. So for the remaining races after the summer break, people expected pure Lewis Hamilton domination, but Nico Rosberg, out of nowhere, after a terrible run to end the first half of the season, goes on a 3-race winning streak, taking back the championship lead in the Singapore Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton having an absolute stinker in Singapore, nearly finishing behind Kimi Raikkonen's Ferrari. But in Malaysia, things seem to have turned around. Sebastian Vettel gets a monster start, but Rosberg cuts across his line and collides with Sebastian Vettel, ending his race, and Rosberg drops all the way to the back and also got a penalty later on for this incident with Kimi Raikkonen. Even though Nico was able to make his way back up the field again, it's useless because Hamilton was about to take a massive chunk of points away from him, and his 3 race wins in a row would have been useless. A pretty dry race became a pretty damn entertaining race with a straight 1v1 between Ricciardo and Verstappen, huh? A Red Bull 1v1 in Malaysia with an Australian. Where have I seen this before? But this time, the Australian comes out on top, making it Ricciardo's first win since the 2014 Belgian Grand Prix, and revenge for Multi-21 in Malaysia this time. And after the race, Lewis Hamilton made a very valid point. Every single Mercedes engine throughout the season has been able to stay intact apart from mine. And which is very true, although his bad luck didn't really come in the races, it did come in qualifying. And you look at the rest of the Mercedes power units, Lewis was the only one getting reliability DNFs. But Lewis was also having terrible starts throughout the season. And a really good example is literally the following race in the Japanese Grand Prix. Rosberg went on to win that, by the way, but Lewis wins every single race in the Americas Tour. Verstappen also had a pretty interesting Americas Tour. He DNF'd in the US and somehow still got driver of the day of that race. Why? In Mexico, he was doing terrible defense on Sebastian Vettel, and in Brazil, Brazil was a great race from him. Look at the save as well. And unfortunately, Felipe Massa DNFs on his final ever race in Brazil. I really hope this doesn't backfire somehow, and this isn't actually his last race in Brazil because of how emotional it is. I really hope not. Hometown hero Felipe Nasr finishes P9, dropping Manor back to last place in P11, forcing them out of the top 10, and now their future in F1 is in jeopardy as they won't get any of the revenue shared as only the top 10 gets the revenue. And with Lewis Hamilton winning this race, the championship goes down too.
No one has the power to shatter your dreams unless you give it to them. A promise and a pact versus going back to back. Here to lead great, here to fight fate. This season requires crowning, confidence, never doubt it. It's in you. Believe, believe, believe. If you a champion, show me you a champion. If you a champion, show me you a champion. The real champions prove that they're champions.
Lewis Hamilton needed to win the race, but Rosberg had to finish outside the podium. And considering how much faster the Mercedes is to the next fastest car on the grid, a lot of people already had in their minds Rosberg will win the championship unless another 2014 happens. And currently, Lewis is putting up his end of the bargain, putting his Mercedes on pole position, while Rosberg is alongside him in P2. But again, Rosberg just has to drive a comfortable race and he wins the championship. And at first, it was looking like that, a comfortable race. I mean, there was nothing happening between the front two until the pit window opened, when both of them got affected by a Ferrari entering the box, costing them time and arguably costed Rosberg more time. So the pressure is slowly ramping up in this race. Button and Perez had a battle with each other until Jensen unfortunately damaged his suspension and retires on his last ever F1 race, which totally wouldn't backfire all the emotions, all the tears, and the celebrations, just like Felipe Massa and Interlagos, right? So that was it, mostly, for the rest of this race. It was looking like a pretty comfortable win for Hamilton and a comfortable championship for Rosberg, until Lewis decided he had one more trick up his sleeve. He decided to try and back Nico into Seb and Max to try and get them to pass him. And Seb only had 2 okay looks on Nico. They weren't amazing looks, you had to be really ballsy to overtake there, and as time ran out and the lap counter ran up, your winner of the 2016 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton. Your world champion, however.
And you helped to make it one of the greatest, most exciting Grand Prix I've seen for a couple of seasons. Would you agree?
Well, I strongly dislike coming second to Lewis.
Just how are you gonna get up like
Nico Rosberg is second. He takes the championship 34 years after his father. It's like father, it's like son for the Rosbergs.
I want to take the opportunity to announce that I've decided to end my Formula One career in this moment here on Monday.
Would I say this came as a shock? Maybe, possibly. but I feel like it was to be expected. He did every single sacrifice in the book to win the championship against Lewis Hamilton. He did what he needed to do, win a world championship, and I respect him for retiring at the top of his game. But now that leaves the Mercedes seat open. Who's gonna fill it? Now there are a few considerations. At first I thought it was going to be Pascal Wehrlein, then I saw headlines of Alonso meeting with Toto Wolff, then I thought it was going to be Alonso, but the answer was staring in our face the whole time. It was going to be Valtteri Bottas. So then, who will be getting the open Williams seat? You know, maybe someone like Jordan King? Alex Lynn? Oliver Rowland? No! It was none of them! It was Felipe Massa, who came out of retirement. All out of the Brazilian Grand Prix for nothing. And he'll be paired alongside very talented, dominated the GP3 season, Lance Stroll. Manor are no longer on the grid after missing out on a ton of revenue for finishing outside the top 10. And their drivers, Ocon and Wehrlein. Ocon went to Force India, replacing departing Nico Hülkenberg, who went to Renault. And Pascal Wehrlein went to Sauber, who was replacing Felipe Nasr, who was supposed to drive for Manor in 2016. And he was the one who sent Manor into administration. So essentially, Felipe Nasr killed his own F1 career. Since Hülkenberg joined Renault, Kevin Magnussen went to Haas, who had a very successful first season, so it's interesting to see where they go from here. And at McLaren, the departing Jenson Button is replaced with Stoffel Van Dorn. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Driver of the Day has been implemented. It's just a popularity contest. I don't really think it matters that much to mention it, but I mentioned it. Anyways, 2017, new cars, bigger tires, the return of the shark fin, 300 times more grip than the previous cars had, which were super unstable. The engines sound a lot better than they did from 2014 to 2016. And Bernie Ecclestone is no longer in charge of F1. He's been bought out by Liberty Media, and with Chase Carey, Ross Brawn, and I forgot the other dude. GP2 is no longer GP2. It has been rebranded to F2. Anyways, 2017. I don't know what it is about it, but it kind of gave you these vibes. It was a pure back and forth between Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. We start off in Australia. Max Verstappen holds Lewis Hamilton on the pit exit, and this gives Sebastian Vettel the delta to pit and complete the overcut. He wins the season opener. In China, cold temperatures help Mercedes secure the win. In Bahrain, Lewis Hamilton gets a penalty for going slowly unnecessarily, and Sebastian Vettel wins. Bottas gets his first win in Russia. Spain giving us the best wheel-to-wheel action of the season between Seb and Lewis Hamilton wins it fair and square. In Monaco, Kimi Raikkonen gets pole position, but Sebastian Vettel completed the overcut on him, giving Ferrari their first win in Monaco since 2001. And Alonso didn't even do that race. He did the Indy 500 instead, and don't ask what happened. And Jenson Button sent Pascal Wehrlein into the harbor. In Canada, Sebastian Vettel gets damaged at the start, but is able to climb all the way up to P4 thanks to Ocon and Perez thinking it's WWE SmackDown and not the Canadian Grand Prix. And then Azerbaijan.
Lewis is backing up the pack a little bit, and he went into him.
He brake tested me. What the going on?
This ruined both of their races. First, Seb got a 10-second stop-and-go penalty and obviously front wing damage. Lewis Hamilton had some damage from the rear. His headrest got loose, and he had to come into the pits and fix it. And this was the first heated moment in the Hamilton-Seb rivalry. Well, to be fair, it's probably the only heated moment in the Hamilton-Seb rivalry. Anyways, what's happening at the front? Ricciardo is the first non-Ferrari or Mercedes winner of the season in this absolute classic of a Grand Prix, and Lance Stroll finishes on the podium in his rookie season. You know what? Well done on him. And obviously there's going to be some discourse on Seb and Lewis after the race, and yeah, general consensus was Seb was wrong. You can't just purposely crash into someone because they did something to you. And at the time, Seb was actually at risk of getting a race ban. I think he had like 8 or 9 points at the time. so he has to be very careful for the rest of the season or until the ban expired. In Austria, somehow Valtteri Bottas has the reactions of freaking Iron Man. What was that? And obviously people would think that he had a jump start because no way he reacted this quickly. And he picks up his second win of the season in the very same race. Now Mercedes have a diva of a car in 2017 where it's not necessarily a slow car, it's just very hard to get the setup right, but it thrives under low track temperatures. And Silverstone is notorious for low track temperatures, and it was Mercedes' domination the whole week long, but there was some drama between the Ferrari drivers. Kimi Raikkonen got a puncture on lap 49, dropping from P3 back down to P4. Yeah, the gaps were pretty big back in the day. And on the following lap, Sebastian Vettel got a puncture as well. And instead of a guaranteed top 3, Seb finished in P7, dropping the championship lead to only 1 point. Hungary would see a switch of form, as since it's a very low speed track, Ferrari dominated the entire weekend, scoring their second 1-2 of the season. But that wasn't the biggest talking point of this race. The biggest talking point was easily Lewis Hamilton letting Valtteri Bottas by on the final corner after they made a deal that if Lewis can't catch Kimi, he has to let Bottas back through again. But to me, it's the fact that he actually complied with these orders in the middle of a title fight. Respect to you, man. Respect to you, Lewis. And going into the summer break, Sebastian Vettel had the upper hand by 14 points. Same can't be said about the constructors, however. Kimi was fully washed by this point. This season has been super close thus far. No one has taken a single consecutive win at all, and it was looking to be a very close finish to end off the season. Then we restart the F1 season in Belgium and Monza, and Mercedes dominated these 2 weekends. Ferrari easily had the best aero package, but Mercedes had the best power unit by far, and since Spa and Monza are very power dependent tracks, yeah, Ferrari weren't even close. And Lewis Hamilton takes the championship lead at the Italian Grand Prix by 3 points. But the next race is in Singapore. This is the opportunity for Sebastian Vettel to regain his championship lead on Lewis Hamilton. As I mentioned earlier, Ferrari have the best aero package and Singapore is very, very low speed. And it showed in qualifying when Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas qualified P5 and P6 with Sebastian Vettel on pole, and the Red Bull drivers being more competitive than Mercedes, with Ricciardo in P3 and Verstappen in P2. And the race was going to be a wet one, the first time in Singapore Grand Prix history. We were down for an absolute class.
Verstappen gets an excellent start. Sebastian Vettel needs to cover him off. Kimi Raikkonen on the inside, and he's crashed with Verstappen. He's hit Vettel as well. Raikkonen is out before the first corner. He's gone into the Red Bull there as well. Carnage as Fernando Alonso gets involved in the McLaren. The Toro Rosso gets to the escape road, and Fernando Alonso is out of this race, as is Kimi Raikkonen. And the season, Raikkonen and Verstappen have collided, and yes, Vettel going backwards. He is off and looks to be out of it too. He's reversed. Sebastian Vettel has lost his front wing. Can he get back to the pits? But look at the damage on the left-hand side.
He's got to pull over. He's pouring fluid out the back of the car.
The dream for Lewis Hamilton, though.
Good start. I was just behind Sebastian and I was thinking, okay, it's just me and him. This is couldn't be sweeter. And then he spun. I was like,
Hamilton then, it is victory number 60. Hamilton wins in Singapore and is 28 points clear at the top of the championship.
Obviously it sucks being on the wrong side of the track now, but that's what it is.
There was some seed talk after this race. Kvyat was just having the worst season he could possibly have after having his confidence shattered by Red Bull in the previous year. And yep, he's been fired and dropped for their junior Pierre Gasly, who won the last ever GP2 championship. And oh no, that wasn't just it for the Toro Rosso seat. Carlos Sainz was set to leave for Renault after the Japanese Grand Prix because Jolyon Palmer, who I've only mentioned once because he was not having the best F1 career at all. And nope, I did not forget about the 2 injured drivers this year. Pascal Wehrlein had back issues to start the season, so he was replaced by Giovinazzi. And Felipe Massa was dazed after a crash in the Hungaroring, so he was replaced by Paul di Resta. Anyways, back to the championship fight. Yeah, Singapore killed some traction, but it wasn't completely over because most of the races, apart from, I'd say, Austin and Mexico, all of them were pretty Ferrari suited. You had pretty high downforce tracks in Malaysia and Japan up next, so they could make some noise. And boy, did they make some noise. In the complete wrong way.
Plus drive. It's over for qualifying for Sebastian Vettel. He's going to start last. Hamilton on pole.
I have no power on the maybe just get round to the grid.
Kimi Räikkönen, due to start on the front row, will now start from the pit lane. He has a turbo issue. Max Verstappen wins the Grand Prix and takes the Malaysia Grand Prix for Red Bull. We're on the slowdown lap. Last, Carlos Sainz is down the inside, goes the Red Bull on Sebastian Vettel. What a move by Max Verstappen.
Vettel's got a major problem, major engine problem.
Box, Sebastian, box. We retire the car, I'm afraid.
He has seen Sebastian Vettel retire from the race. Lewis Hamilton wins the Japanese Grand Prix.
Hamilton is now up by 59 points, which means it's a match point in America. But Seb lives to see another day in Mexico, and they have a collision on lap 1. Verstappen takes advantage of it. Hamilton drops to P9, but it doesn't matter. Lewis Hamilton is your world champion for 2017. Getting his 4th world championship, matching Alain Prost, and ironically matching Sebastian Vettel as well. It was a disappointing end to what was otherwise a very closely matched season, and it can really be just pointed down to reliability from Ferrari in the Asian Tour. But it's fine, as we head to a brand new year, 2018. Yup, Liberty Media did a completely new rebrand, staying away from tradition and trying something new, which the purists hate, but now, you know what, I don't really mind this. I mean, this is pretty much what we have in F1 nowadays. Anyways, 2018 now, McLaren and Honda had a terrible 3-year stint, and McLaren are now going to Renault, and they have the same power units as the Red Bulls, meaning that they should be competitive this year, right? Pascal Wehrlein is no longer in F1, which is a crime because he did much better than Marcus Ericsson, and Marcus Ericsson retained his seat, and his teammate is now reigning F2 champion Charles Leclerc. Technically, Toro Rosso and Renault had new lineups, while Toro Rosso just had the lineup they ended 2017 with, Gasly and Hartley, same with Renault. Well, I guess Sergei Sirotkin's there. And since Red Bull have a deteriorating relationship with Renault to the point where they rebadged them as Tag Heuer engines, they gave Toro Rosso Honda engines for 2018 to sort of test them and see if they can use Honda as a power supplier in 2019. The Halo is now officially mandatory for every single F1 car to run, and the Hypersofts have been added as well. Anyways, we start 2018 with a bang, quite literally. Valtteri Bottas has his heavy crash in qualifying. And in the race, the Haas mechanics apparently forgot how to use the wheel guns, and once again Ferrari nailed the strategy in Australia, and they opened the season for the 2nd year in a row. And Alonso finished 5th. Now we can fight, eh? Sebastian Vettel wins in Bahrain holding off Valtteri Bottas after Ferrari gave Seb a bad strategy, and Pierre Gasly finished 4th, and Hamilton had a good recovery drive. And even though Ferrari won, they got fined after the race for their pit lights, as it injures one of their mechanics. In China, Valtteri Bottas undercuts both Ferrari drivers, then Gasly and Hartley cause a safety car, and on the safety car restart, Daniel Ricciardo dive bombs his way to the victory, and Max Verstappen kills Sebastian Vettel at the hairpin. Sebastian Vettel gets a hat-trick of poles in Azerbaijan, and in the race,
but he's going to try and dive down the inside. They have crashed. They've gone into each other.
And Seb gets quite unlucky here with Mercedes nailing the strategy, leaving Bottas out for as long as they did. And on the safety car restart, he locks up into turn 1, flat spots his tires, drops behind Sergio Perez, and Valtteri Bottas ran over some debris, and Lewis Hamilton wins the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He didn't even do anything in this race, he just drove and got the win. But he's leading the championship right now. The Spanish Grand Prix was pure Lewis Hamilton domination, with Ferrari making a dumb strategical decision, boxing Sebastian Vettel under the virtual safety car, and this left him out of the podium spots. Monaco, redemption day for Daniel Ricciardo, finally winning the Monaco Grand Prix after failing to do so in 2016 after Red Bull forgot him in the pits. And he even had an MGUH failure, was it MGUK? And he wins by 7 seconds on Sebastian Vettel. What a drive, Great management from him as well. Brendan Hartley and Lance Stroll crash in Canada, and the rest of the race was very boring. Sebastian Vettel wins, and Winnie Harlow waved the flag a lap too early. And Sebastian Vettel takes back the championship lead. In the return of Paul Ricard, Sebastian Vettel snipes Valtteri Bottas on lap 1, giving both of them damage, and Lewis Hamilton wins it and takes back the championship lead again. We're having a proper back and forth now, are we? And in Austria, double trouble for Mercedes, as both of their drivers DNF, but Ferrari don't take full advantage of this, as Sebastian Vettel only manages to finish P3, while Kimi was in P2 and Verstappen won his first race of the season, and only takes back the championship lead by a single point. But things will take a turn in Great Britain, as Kimi Raikkonen now snipes Lewis Hamilton, and Sebastian Vettel takes full advantage of this, winning that race, and Valtteri Bottas can't defend to save his life, and yeah, he's not having the best of seasons, is he? Kimi got a penalty with his incident with Lewis, and he climbed up the field, and yeah, both of them had great recovery drives in this race. And Seb just seemed to keep on getting luckier, as in Germany.
Stop. It's trundling. No, stop.
This is Hamilton getting out of his Mercedes car. He's trying to push it back into the pits. Just watching him kneeling down by the side of his car. He looks properly winded and wounded now. Here at Hockenheim, Vettel crosses the line now, and it is pole position for Sebastian Vettel.
Yes, P1. Here is the German Löwe.
You just have to suck it up and move forwards. When you're fighting for a championship this close, you can't afford days like this.
Especially at home, so that's really nice.
He was about to extend his championship lead by double digits in front of his home crowd. He couldn't have asked for a better situation.
Sebastian Vettel, he has been leading almost from start to finish, but now he's out of this race.
Sorry, guys. Keep it saying now. Stay up.
Lewis Hamilton leads the Grand Prix.
Hamilton, he is indeed. He's going steaming down the outside. What's Hamilton going to do about that?
Defend for all his might.
Valtteri, it's James. Please hold position. I'm sorry. Copy, James.
When you're fighting for a championship this close, you can't afford days like this.
It's not going to be Sebastian Vettel's day. Lewis Hamilton regains the lead of the championship. Lewis Hamilton, from 14th on the grid, wins the German Grand Prix. And for the first time in Germany, Mercedes have a 1-2 finish to regain the lead in the Constructors' Championship.
Get in there, Lewis. Miracles do happen, mate.
Guys, what an amazing job by you guys. Thank you so much. Love conquers all.
16 points is still very much possible to win the championship, but throwing away an easy win in front of your home crowd is definitely going to take a toll on you mentally. Ferrari definitely had the best package to win the Hungarian Grand Prix, but another wet-affected session. Lewis Hamilton's just the ultimate rainmaster. He gets pole position in Hungary, and he closes the summer break thanks to Valtteri Bottas holding up the two Ferrari drivers and extends his lead to 24 points, the biggest it has been all season long. Fernando Alonso now officially announces he's retiring from F1, and so does Eric Boullier. Eric Boullier resigns from McLaren in the middle of the season, and we are now officially in the full Zach Brown takeover. And down at Red Bull, Daniel Ricciardo can clearly sense there's a shift within the team towards favoring Max Verstappen, and he decides to jump ship before it gets too toxic and joins the Renault F1 team for 2019. And Carlos Sainz, following Fernando Alonso's footsteps, joins McLaren. And fun fact, around this time, he actually had the exact same career trajectory as Fernando Alonso. Ferrari reopened the summer break at Spa with a win, proving that the championship is in fact not yet dead. And in the Italian Grand Prix, they lock out the front row, but with a twist. Kimi is on pole instead of Seb, but this is Ferrari. They've always prioritized the number one drivers before, and they already messed up by giving Kimi instead of Seb the toe. So they should at least know to let Kimi give way for Sebastian Vettel. And Kimi didn't do that. It was a total disaster. Seb drops it dead last. Mercedes used Valtteri Bottas as a bug to burn Kimi Raikkonen's tires, and Lewis Hamilton wins the Italian Grand Prix. And the lead is now more than a race win as Sebastian Vettel finishes in P4. But Singapore is next, and all season long, Mercedes have been struggling at the street tracks. And in every free practice session in the Singapore Grand Prix, it's been Red Bull versus Ferrari. Even in Q1 and Q2, it was Red Bull versus Ferrari, with Kimi Raikkonen setting the fastest time of the weekend in Q2. And in Q3...
Back in, snaky as he tried to apply the power, but he's been quick in the middle sector. But Hamilton quicker still.
Provisional pole goes to Kimi Raikkonen. Onwards now to the final.
difficult to ever say if it's your best one or not, but that one felt the most complete lap that I think I might have ever done.
And after Ferrari cocked up the strategy on Sunday, Lewis Hamilton increases the championship lead to 40 points. I went to this race, by the way. It's the first race I ever attended in the V6 era. Lewis goes on to win the next 2 races in Russia and Japan, with a bit of help from Valtteri Bottas, yes, and another help from Ferrari, completely messing up Q3 in Japan. But it's same story as last year, match point in America. But Ferrari had one more trick up their sleeve.
Ahead of the car in fourth place. Oh, and Hamilton goes in. Hamilton tries to go down the inside. He can't do it once again. Is the outside the way to go here? Not on that occasion. Hamilton and Max Verstappen going wheel to wheel, and Verstappen on the better line, getting away from Hamilton as he goes wide.
And Kimi Raikkonen wins for the first time since the 2013 Australian Grand Prix. In his last season for Ferrari, I kind of forgot to mention that Leclerc and Gasly were going to Ferrari and Red Bull, but it's whatever. And Sebastian Vettel lives to see another day. But in Mexico, Lewis Hamilton finally cements his 5th World Championship, matching Juan Manuel Fangio and eclipsing Sebastian Vettel in the process. And that was it for the year until Esteban Ocon sniped Verstappen in Brazil, giving the win to Hamilton instead. And Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, and Sebastian Vettel doing donuts at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. We will miss you, Fernando. Go secure the final piece of the Triple Crown. We're on the last freaking year finally, 2019. I'm almost done with this. And not so hard of a year to end on. 2019, a pretty revolutionary year for the sport, because it was the first season of... Say whatever you want about Drive to Survive and its fake narratives, blah blah blah, we get it, but it definitely helped F1 grow to the status it is at right now. And say what you want about the fans that followed F1 because of Drive to Survive. Everyone starts from somewhere. I started from somewhere. I started because I was named after Fernando Alonso. You had a reason for starting watching F1 at some point, so why can't these new fans who started watching from Netflix watch and enjoy F1? Sport is for everyone. But enough yapping. I didn't want to use any clips past 2020, but I had to for this segment. But anyways, the 2019 season. The aerodynamics were made a lot simpler to reduce dirty air. You now get awarded a point if you get the fastest lap of the race, unless you finish outside the top 10. Red Bull are now using Honda engines for the near future after a successful experiment with Toro Rosso. So yeah, gone are the Tag Heuer engines. I already mentioned a few driver changes, I won't repeat them. Lando Norris replaces Stoffel Van Dorn at McLaren. Really feel bad for Stoffel. He was one of my favorite drivers at the time, but it was a change of management from Ron Dennis to Zach Brown. This makes sense. Lance Stroll goes to Force India, which was rebranded to Racing Point after Papa Stroll bought it at the 2018 Belgian Grand Prix, and he's now paired alongside Sergio Perez. And Esteban Ocon is back to being a Mercedes reserve driver. With Gasly leaving for the main team at Red Bull and Brendan Hartley not having the best rookie season, the new Toro Rosso lineup is Alex Albon, who was supposed to do Formula E, but was able to find a seat last minute, and Danny Kvyat, after testing Ferrari cars for a year, is now back with the Red Bull family. And he's looking to rebuild his image in the F1 paddock. With Charles Leclerc now at Ferrari, Kimi Raikkonen goes back to where it all began, Sauber, who fully rebranded to Alfa Romeo Racing for the 2019 season. And Antonio Giovinazzi is paired alongside him. Williams have reigning F2 champion George Russell alongside... He's back! That's right, Robert Kubica is back in F1. After a 9-year absence because of the rally crash, he's back. What else can I say? It's a perfect way to end the decade. Anyways, Valtteri Bottas, after a terrible 2018, opens up the season winning the Australian Grand Prix by an extremely large margin, and he leads the championship for the first time in his career. And in the next race in Bahrain, in Charles Leclerc's second race for Ferrari, he gets pole position. And he could have won that race, but thanks to the Ferrari reliability, he finished P3 instead, and Sebastian Vettel bottled that win big time. You're still seeing shades of 2018, Seb, but hey, at least this race gave us a glimpse of how competitive this season was gonna be.
Well, how was it, Cartman? Dude, it's boring as shit.
Quite literally, nothing happened until the Canadian Grand Prix when we were finally about to get our first non-Mercedes winner of the season, and then Sebastian Vettel squeezes Lewis Hamilton to the wall, gets a 5-second penalty, and Lewis ends up winning that anyways, and the race after that in France was probably the worst F1 race of all time. Charles Leclerc was close to matching Sebastian Vettel, but Pierre Gasly, on the other hand, way far behind from Max Verstappen. And he's at risk of getting demoted to Toro Rosso by the summer break. But every race, from Austria until Singapore, pure cinema. Just pure cinema. But before we get into those races, unfortunately in this time frame, we lost two very prominent figures in F1. Charlie Whiting and Niki Lauda. Charlie Whiting, for those of you who probably don't know, was the race director of F1 back in the day. For a very long time already, for as long as I can remember. We know who Niki Lauda is, one of the greatest drivers of all time, who also has one of the greatest stories of all time. And alongside with that, he built the Mercedes team from the ground up. And it's sad to see him go. In Austria, Charles Leclerc got a second pole position of the season, and he was looking clear to win the race until Max Verstappen made a late charge towards the end, and a bit of a dodgy move similar to Hamilton and Rosberg, but Max was ahead of the apex, so he keeps his win. In Great Britain, we had Hamilton versus Bottas, Leclerc versus Verstappen, and Sebastian Vettel finishes behind Robert Kubica. Germany was absolute cinema, probably the best race of this decade. Both Ferraris broke down in qualifying. Charles Leclerc was being a dum-dum, Lewis Hamilton was being a dum-dum, Nico Hülkenberg was being a dummy, Max Verstappen was also being a dummy. The only driver who kept in this race was Sebastian freaking Vettel, who started from all the way at the back of the grid. Along with both Mercedes drivers being stupid, the Mercedes pit crew themselves were stupid, and they were nowhere near in contention to win this race. Towards the end, the top three was Max Verstappen, Danny Kvyat, and Lance Stroll. And Sebastian Vettel overtakes both of them, securing P2. Max Verstappen wins his second race of the season. Vettel goes from last to second, 2018 redemption. And Danny Kvyat gets a podium before Pierre Gasly. Max Verstappen secures his first ever pole position and looked clear for the win until Mercedes did the double stop. Red Bull tried a long game and his tires burned towards the end. Lewis wins this race, and Carlos Sainz kept Pierre Gasly behind for the entire race. And off we head now to the summer break.
So it's finally happened. Red Bull have replaced Pierre Gasly with Alex Albon.
Now, do I think this was the right decision? At the time, no, because I think they should have dropped him for Danny Kvyat, because Kvyat was exceptional all season long, but I also did think Alex was going to do better than Pierre Gasly at Red Bull, so you know what, we're 50-50 on this decision. And Haas were having a dumpster fire of a 2019 after a pretty decent 2018, and it doesn't help with the fact that they have dodgy sponsors. We restart the F1 season at the Belgian Grand Prix, but unfortunately in the F2 sprint race, Antoine Hubert lost his life in a freak accident. And involved in that accident as well, Juan Manuel Correa also gets heavily injured in the incident. Losing any driver is tough, but this one hit home especially because a lot of the drivers on the grid are close friends with Antoine Hubert, especially Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc. And Charles Leclerc did his friend justice, as the next two races,
Charles Leclerc can now see the checkered flag, and for the first time ever, Charles Leclerc wins a Formula 1 Grand Prix.
This one is for F1. Feels good, but yeah, difficult to enjoy on a weekend like this.
Charles Leclerc's on pole at Monza. Sebastian Vettel, and he spun. Is it a grande move from Lewis Hamilton? Leclerc's on the inside.
He didn't leave me a class bit there, push me off.
Leclerc locks up, goes through the chicane. Hamilton now wanted to go round the outside, has to switch to the inside. Leclerc is making it very difficult indeed. Oh, lock up from Lewis Hamilton goes on into the runoff area. Mercedes threw everything at him today. Charles Leclerc has coped brilliantly. He won in Spa. He wins in Monza.
At only his first season at Ferrari, Charles Leclerc did something Sebastian Vettel hasn't done in 5 seasons with Ferrari, winning a race at Monza, and Seb's future is now in jeopardy. And in Singapore, it was looking like Leclerc is going to get his 3rd win in a row, but Sebastian Vettel takes it. And looking at his career trajectory right now, this might potentially be his last ever win in F1. The next race in Russia was Ferrari's worst race of the season. Ferrari made an agreement for Charles to give Seb the tow so that he can get by him at the start to put them in a 1-2 position. Seb does that, but he doesn't give the place back to Leclerc. His engine then dies, and thanks to the virtual safety car, Mercedes inherit a 1-2. Ferrari then get the next 2 pole positions, making it 6 in a row, and again, they can't capitalize on it. In Japan, the Mercedes was genuinely faster on race pace, and in Mexico, another bad strategy. And in the US, Sebastian Vettel's suspension dies on him, Valtteri Bottas wins the race, but Lewis Hamilton secures his 6th World Championship, his 3rd in a row, and 1 more away from Michael Schumacher. In Brazil, this was the boiling point of the relationship between the Ferrari drivers, as on the Reta Pasta Straight, they collide with each other, causing both of them to DNF. And Max Verstappen secures 3rd in the championship with a win, and Pierre Gasly finishes 2nd in the Toro Rosso with a bit of help from Lewis Hamilton for sending Alex Albon's Red Bull into Cancun. Oh wait, Hamilton did what? Isn't that penalty worthy? Well, he did get a penalty after the race. And doesn't that mean... McLaren, after years of pain since the McLaren Honda days, in fact even since Lewis Hamilton left, they finally get their first podium since Kevin Magnussen in Australia. What a way to end the decade, and don't forget Carlos Sainz's first podium. He's finally in a team that he can call his own. And the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was quite an emotional one, as it was potentially Nico Hülkenberg's last ever race in F1. It's not looking great for his future at the moment, considering the talent pool and also his age. Lewis Hamilton cruises to the line to secure his 84th win of his career, 7 away from Michael Schumacher. Can he get 91 race wins or even 100? And with that, we cap off the 2019 season and therefore the decade. So that was a long video. That was way too long. I don't really know what to put for the outro, so I'll just mention a few things. All the songs used in this video, I put them all in the Spotify playlist, apart from the non-copyright music that I use for some segment. Those are not on the Spotify playlist. Mostly all of them are, so go check that out if you're interested. Support me on Patreon in case this video isn't monetized, because obviously with the amount of footage we use, it probably won't get monetized at this point. Other than that, subscribe to the channel, trying to reach 10,000, and follow me on Instagram. Other than that, roll credits.